I moved to San Francisco when I was 13 from Italy, from Rome. And then when I moved here, I became interested in like filmmaking really as my kind of first passion, or first medium that I played around with. So I was making videos and that were like mostly skate videos, and like little like goof around kind of movies with my friends. But at the same time, I was also making like a lot of zines, like just photocopied like things that I liked, like which were mostly like collage and movie reviews and like, just like these kind of like hodgepodge little fanzines. And then I went to college, my parents moved back to Italy when I was 18, so I stayed and went to like USF, which is a liberal arts school, and I ended up focusing on media studies there. And from that point, I got like really into like kind of the theory, behind film and television production, but also like media theory. So that program there was like some practice, and some theory. So like I studied with like Melinda Stone, Sam Green, people like that, and then on the theory side of things, I had this really great mentor named Andrew Goodwin who passed away, but he was like a media theorist, who introduced me to like some amazing things like John Berger, which is like a big foundation for me, and this television serial show called The Prisoner. There's so much theory in that show, like that's very evident. And so I was sort of thinking like how I first started becoming interested in like how you consume visual text. Like, I guess, it's something that happens in college, like I'm sure it happened for you. It's like you've been watching these things your whole life, and it's not like the content is changing, You're just watching it from a different perspective because you're like thinking critically about it, and you become like obsessed with that. I have my own visual art practice, and then I have my job, which is Culpa Press, and in which I'm like a publisher, and I work with David Kasperzak, and we make books together. But slowly over time, those things have become like pretty hard to distinguish from each other, because I make my own books and I put them out under Culpa Press, and a lot of the same sort of like energy that I put towards art projects, I put towards other people's art projects. Yeah, and I think that's what publishing is. It's like it's like a collaborative process with the artist, and making a new object together, or at least that's how we've always treated it. Wow. So for me, it's like it's hard to imagine like conceiving of an art show and not having it have the same like sort of like rigor as a book has, where it doesn't only have to exist, it has to like convince you why it exists, I designed the show, obviously like Chris, who's the Grunder, who's the gallerist there, like gave me a lot of great feedback. But yeah, now for me it's like, so every time I work on an art project of my own, I start by making a book. So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna, photograph, I think for this show I photographed like 200 films. Yeah, and then I kind of like based around a loose theme, which was that I wanted to shoot like empty interiors, as just kind of like an organizational principle, which I do for like all of our publishing projects. I'll just be like, let's just start with something as like an organizational principle, because I feel like making stuff with like the expansiveness of everything that's available to you now is like a little overwhelming. So I always need to be like, okay, well I know that if I'm going to shoot it on my color video printer, which is basically like a camera that hooks up to your VHS player, which is how I make all my images. Like I know if I have to shoot it on there, we have to have it on tape, or I have to be able to get it on tape. And so that whittles it down, right?
Yeah, that's why you got this like different textures of the colors, layers.
Oh, well, that's done because I do like this color separation process, and I print it on the risograph. Mm-hmm. But the originals, which are like the glossy ones, those are a color video printer, it's called, which is basically like the predecessor to a screenshot.
Oh yeah, I read about it in your website.
Yeah, so you plug it into your VCR, and then you can take basically Polaroids of whatever's on the screen.
Oh, wow, that is cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and you can still buy the film because they use it for like sonograms and like colonoscopies and stuff like that. Because it's like just any analog video feed can go into it. But yeah, so I start with that, and I'm like, I'm gonna, interiors and films, which I think is like kind of an interesting topic, but not interesting enough for a whole show, and so I shoot them all, and then I like look at it, and I started to become obsessed with this idea of like, well, because I look at them all spread out on a big table, and it's just like try to think about like the sequencing that would happen in the book, right? Like what images go next to each other, like what's the sequence from spread to spread. And then when I see them all together, I started becoming obsessed with this idea that it's like that the process of finding them was actually pretty difficult, because there's hardly any shots in films that are interior and devoid of characters. Because normally when people do establishing shots, they do exterior shots. Yeah. And so there were all these like split seconds, like right before someone came in or right after they left. And so they were empty rooms, but you could feel this like sort of like buzz from like the potential action that was about to happen. Well, especially with this project, right? Like if it's about space, and like like obviously like I don't have all these ideas in the beginning of my mind when I'm making it, Yeah. But like as I started working on it, it was like, if it's about space and the space that's kind of like created between the viewer and the filmmaker, right? It's like a shared space. It's not like it's not like a top-down kind of thing, right? Like it's like you're watching and they're giving you the visual, and so there's the thing you're seeing on the screen, but there's also like your mental image of it, right? Yeah. And so like, so I like to think about that stuff as like this shared space. And then it's like, well, if we can both inhabit that space, don't we just inhabit it? Can we inhabit it like separate from the film, right? Yeah. Like, doesn't it stay with you and you can like reuse it? And so that's the thing I was trying to like capture with that show. Like, can we all be in these spaces and not know what they're used for? Like, so you kind of live in it and you like maybe know the movie, but probably not, and it gives you this weird feeling of like, either distance or warmth, depending if it's like a horror movie or, like, can you still elicit feelings just from the interiors, because so much about film is like technique used to elicit feeling, right? Yeah. And so I don't know, I really liked that as a concept, and that's why I decided to make a show about it. In case you wanted to see it in person.
Oh, yes.
I mean, that one too, it was like the same thing. It was like, but it was more tied to, a specific place, to San Francisco. Because it's like, I was like interested in this kind of like shared construction of a city, right? Like and that one, the text that really inspired me was a film called Los Angeles Plays Itself, which is a movie about the geography of Los Angeles being like sort of like negotiated by all the films that happen there that use Los Angeles as a place to show you another city, you know? So like kind of confuses the identity of the city. So like, I mean, that's like one of the points in it. It's this amazing documentary about like how films change our perception. But I was interested in that with San Francisco. It's like how much of the way that as someone who, I feel like a local here, I've been here for a long time. And it's like, as someone who's been here forever, like, how much of the city is something that is what you might perceive as like the real San Francisco, and how much of it is like this like ideal that I hold in my head based from film, from television, counterculture, like you know. But I try to make an effort to have like a lot of different price points too, because it's like there, you know, there's always like something free, something for $10, something for $30, and then, you know, like if you can't afford the artwork, you can afford some version of it that's not just a catalog, you know. And so that's important to me, but also like the idea of art not necessarily having to have like this sort of prestige to it, you know, like a lot of the reason I started making books was like I was interested in having an art practice that was like normalized, like, oh, you know, like I could, even though it's still difficult, like I can see myself publishing and making work, and it's not like the rat race that like the big like capital A art world is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just the fact that like it should be okay. Like I've always envisioned myself like that. I've always wanted to be like a working artist, but never like a famous artist. And I know it's easy to say that because like obviously like if you anyone who could be a famous artist probably would be, and it's not like it's like an attack on fame. I just think that artists should be able to have just like regular lives, not superstars and not dirt poor, just like normal, you know.